Shishir, great to have you. You are, a long-time legendary product leader in the Valley, epic run at YouTube and Google, obviously founder of Coda, and now running Grammarly, which is one of the best kept secrets in Silicon Valley in terms of scale and impact and revenue trajectory. And so we're really excited to have your insights today. Just to ground us, tell us, Grammarly and Coda recently merged, came together. Tell us what the business currently is doing, its current level of scale, and what the next couple of years look like. And then we'll get into some questions for everyone's interest in leadership and management and hiring, product, pricing, and of course, AI and how you're thinking about it. But first, ground us in Grammarly.
I'll tell a little bit of the story of what happened, and they'll explain a little bit how to contextualize some of the stats and so on. So as Ben mentioned, I started Coda about 10 years ago. Before that, I was at Google for a long time. I used to run the YouTube group there. Coda, we grew really well, got to a few million users, about 50,000 teams, a bunch of big customers, New York Times, Amazon, Snap, a bunch of, actually one of my favorite Coda customers is the Sphere in Las Vegas, runs on Coda.
Who's all the Backstreet Boys? The Sphere. Who wanted to see the Backstreet Boys? A lot of FOMO.
They're doing Wizard of Oz now.
They're doing Wizard of Oz?
That's apparently remastered and done very well. They planned that whole thing in Coda. Anyways, Coda was on a good journey, and one day I got a call from one of my investors, a guy named Hemant Taneja from General Catalyst, and he says, I'd like to introduce you to the founders of Grammarly, and you should talk to them before we were about to raise another round of financing. You should talk to them first. It's one of those calls where it wasn't really an ask. It was like, you should go talk to them. But I said, I don't quite get it. What Grammarly and Coda didn't feel like they had that much to do with each other. And he said, no, take the call. You'll enjoy it. So I flew up to Vancouver, spent a couple days with Max and Alex, the co-founders.
Company was based in Canada?
No, the founders are. The company's based here. Well, the company was founded in Ukraine 16 years ago. So I have 150 people in Kyiv. We're actually, Ukraine is to Kyiv what Spotify is to Stockholm. It's like the most desirable employer in the most desirable tech employer in the city. It's like anything we do makes countrywide news in Ukraine. It also means I have to be very up on what's happening with the war and what the latest things the politicians are doing and so on. Anyways, but the founders now live in Vancouver. So I went up there and I learned a bunch about Grammarly. And as Ben mentioned, I think Grammarly is one of the best kept secrets in the Valley because it's a business that's very easy to underestimate. So this was about a year ago now, but at the time said Grammarly was serving about 40 million daily active users, a lot of people. We were at the time doing about 700 million a year or so in revenue. We've crossed 800 since. It's a much bigger scale that way than people think. And maybe one other fun stat is Grammarly does about 100 billion LLM calls a week. So it's actually a much bigger AI platform than people think. But they said there's one big misconception about Grammarly. The misconception is people think it's about grammar. And that seems like an easy mistake to make. It's in the name, although not for much longer. You can talk about naming as well.
We'll talk about naming and branding soon.
But they described to me what the technology of Grammarly is, and it was a little bit different than how I thought about it. So the actual thing that Grammarly has built is a technical architecture for bringing AI right to where people work. Now, we didn't call it AI when that happened, and the team has sort of they thought about the whole thing differently, but the view is that Grammarly built the first agent, the original agent. And if you think about it that way, what Grammarly does is it works in about 500,000 or so different applications. So every web app, desktop app, mobile app that you use, everything from Slack to Gmail to Salesforce to your performance review app to anything, Grammarly can read your screen, annotate it in a way that is unobtrusive to anything else you're doing or the application's doing, and it can make changes on your behalf anywhere, all day long. And so the team inside likes to call this the AI Superhighway. Most of the hard technical work has been how do you do that level of mostly front-end integration with all those different products, each one done a little bit differently. Happy to tell stories about that as well. So they call this the AI Superhighway, but there's one big problem. We only run one car on that highway. So that car is the one with your high school grammar teacher in it. Turns out to be a really valuable car. And probably not the agent. I'm guessing half the companies here are doing something with agents. Probably not the agent you started with of how do I get the high school grammar teacher to go do something. It turns out to be really, really valuable, especially when your grammar teacher can sit right next to you and help make sure you spell your company's name properly or do hyphens and dashes correctly. And he said, what would it look like if we opened this up as a platform for anybody to build agents? And so just to give you an example, imagine you were sitting down to write an email to a customer and you had a set of agents working with you, and one of them came in and said, this is what's wrong with your grammar or your hyphens or whatever it might be. Another one said, hey, you've misquoted, another one knows your sales system and says, you misquoted the price on this product. Another one knows your support system and says, this customer actually had an outage last week, you should probably say something about that. Another one is your virtual EA and says, you said you could meet Tuesday at 7 p.m., but you actually can't do that. You have your daughter's reception at that time.
Are these agents that Grammarly is building for customers, or you're saying customers are building on top of your platform?
So the idea is to open up the platform to anybody. From that perspective, Grammarly starts to feel, and part of the reason they wanted to talk to me about it was, I'll talk about the Coda piece in a minute, but it starts to feel a little bit closer to what we built at YouTube. It's an open platform where a big piece of what we do is get distribution for your agents. And if you think about most companies, they build or buy a bunch of AI software that is very hard to get people to use. I'll give you one fun contextual stat on this. I mentioned earlier we do 100 billion LLM calls a week across about 40 million daily active users. That works out to a few thousand calls a day. If you just sort of contextualize that and look at other scaled AI players, in my mind, there's sort of the horizontal AI players roughly break into three buckets, what we call assist, chat, and do. So there's a group that, maybe I'll start with chat. The most iconic chat company out there is, of course, ChatGPT. That's the one that one of the fastest growing companies in history. If you use ChatGPT a dozen times in a day, you'd be a pretty heavy user. There's another bucket I call do. Those are all the people building agents and AI that goes off and does things in a headless way. I think the Anthropic team mentioned that something like 39% of their query load now is for long-running tasks, much of that to Claude Code. That's really exciting too. Again, if you can get to a dozen things in a day, it'd be a lot. Grammarly gets a couple thousand chances at bringing AI to you every single day. We do it every time you press a key. We do it every time you load a document, every time you load a web page, every time you open an app on your phone. We're trying to figure out what is the best way to bring AI to you. And so that's sort of the heart of what we're doing. Along the way, we are also picking off a few, so we're building this platform for agents. We're building some of those agents ourselves, so Grammarly becomes one of those agents, but we're opening that up broadly, so anybody can build them. That'll happen later this year.
And what does that look like? Anyone can build on top of Grammarly. What does that look like at a product level?
Yeah, I think there's lots of different examples. Maybe I'll give a couple that I think are interesting. One, I'll pick a consumer application. So it's really fun meeting with Luis is the CEO of Duolingo. People know Duolingo. It's a really popular translation service and application. And we were chatting about Grammarly and AI Superhighway and what the future of agents looks like. And he was kind of intrigued, but he kind of ended that part of the conversation and said, that's really cool. Probably doesn't apply to us. We build apps. Somebody else will build agents. And I said, no, I think it actually applies to you as well. And so we ended up brainstorming for the next hour on what would a Duolingo agent look like? And we ended up coming up with 3 ideas. So the first one was, imagine that one of Duolingo's most remarkable features is streaks. Imagine if you could keep your streak alive just by just doing something in that language. And so today I read 3 articles in Spanish and I wrote an email in Spanish. Check off today. So,
anyone using Duolingo?
Yeah.
And what's your current streak?
It's just ended like 83 days.
What happened on day 84?
I don't know.
But maybe you weren't getting credit.
Maybe you weren't getting credit.
For that, and I just do the math.
Yeah.
What language are you trying to learn?
I'm learning Spanish.
Learning Spanish, okay. So on day 84, you might have read an article, you didn't get credit.
That's right.
Now
so that was idea number 1, right? So idea number 2, now imagine that agent, the Duolingo agent, can not only watch what you're doing, but can actually interact with it. So it can come in and say, hey, I see you're trying to read this thing in Spanish. I know your reading level. You're not going to be able to get through this. I'm going to pre-translate the words you don't know so that you don't have to hit that Google Translate button. And now you should be able to get the rest of this. Or go the other way around. I see you're doing this thing in English. Maybe this is a perfect time to give you a little inline lesson. And so I'm going to take the words you do know and I'm going to translate them into Spanish. And now you should try to make it through this in that way. And then the third thing was now you come back to Duolingo, you come back to the office and you're ready to meet your tutor. And but this time the tutor actually knows something about you. And so it says, today I was planning a lesson on how to order food at a restaurant, but it looks like what I should really help you do is hire engineers. So today's lesson is going to be about how to hire an engineer. So in that way, I think that right now we think about agents lots of different ways, but in this world we're taking an application and saying, what would it feel like if every application felt like a human that followed you everywhere and could actually interact with you? I think that view of agents, I think, is really interesting. So that's maybe one example.
Yeah, fascinating. And I know you're kind of telling the broader story, but can we just jump a little bit to practical advice on sort of prompt ops or working with foundation models? We have a lot of people here building various agents and AI application companies across different categories. Granted, you're operating at a higher scale than probably everyone in this room, but is there anything generalizable you've learned when you think about interfacing with the foundation model companies and keeping up with the latest and greatest from Anthropic, OpenAI, et cetera?
I'm happy to share. I do think the way we use AI is different than most companies. So some of this will not be that translatable. So I mentioned 100 billion LLM calls a week. About 3% of those go to publicly available LLMs through their APIs. It's mostly OpenAI, but we do proxy between all of them. The 97% run on our own hosted models, mostly Llama 3, and we use every scale of model from the 3 billion parameter model all the way up. And the reason for that is we have to operate at incredibly low latency and incredibly low cost. So if you think about a few thousand queries a day per person, every time you press a key, we need to get you an answer back in milliseconds, and we need to be able to do it without breaking the bank. And we run the whole thing. The other AI companies all raise lots and lots of capital. We've chosen to run profitably. So that leads to a very different way about thinking about prompt engineering and thinking about LLMs in general. So for us, most of our systems are somewhat hybrid systems. So the classic old school Grammarly was built like you would expect as a rule-based system. Lots and lots of complicated grammar rules, mostly written in language called Clojure. And we've basically taken that and we've inverted it and said any node of your rule can be an LLM call. But there's a cost associated with it. And so a lot of that is we actually minimize how much we call the LLM. So if there's a regex that can do the same job, like you don't need an LLM to tell you that's 3 spaces instead of 2 spaces. It's a big waste of compute to go do that. But you do need an LLM to tell you that that tone is inappropriate to send to Ben. And so how do you build rules that mix all those things together has been a big part of our challenge. The other thing I'd say is we operate at enough scale where we don't rely on any particular LLM. That's actually turned out to be less about quality and more about performance and uptime. So they turn out to go down a lot. And so we run a service we call LLM Proxy, which hopefully at some point we won't have to run anymore and somebody else will build that layer. But it allows us to take requests and route them and say, right now it looks like OpenAI is serving too slow. We'll reroute to Anthropic. Again, I'm not sure any of that is that translatable.
It's interesting. And while we're on the topic of AI and products, then we'll zoom out and talk more about hiring and general business concepts. But Sasha, do you want to ask your question about pricing product features in an AI world? There's a mic next there. You can give a little context if you want. Go for it.
Sure.
And intro yourself too for people.
I'm Sasha. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Puzzle, a modern accounting solution like QuickBooks, just much better. And so one of the things that, at least in our industry, and so I'll provide the context just in case it helps you answer, is that it's mostly been a SaaS business for a long time. And so of the industry, 250 billion is services, 100 billion is software. And with AI, you can now automate some of the things that were previously done in services that weren't able to be done very easily in software. And so I want to just we're just now trying to think about pricing now that sort of the product is working really well. and I just have literally no idea how to do pricing. And so I'd love any thoughts, learnings, insights about how to price AI.
How to price in general, and then also
how to
AI.
price in general, and how to think about AI. Yeah.
Okay. Pricing masterclass in 2 minutes. Go.
Yeah, this is such a broad question. I mean, I do think maybe maybe the highest order thing I could tell you is pricing is part of the product, and so how you price is not an afterthought. It incents all the behavior in the product. In many products, the price is a defining part of the product. So it is a very important question. I don't think there's a generic answer. I think some of the most interesting things I've worked on in the past, the price innovation was a big piece. Like one of the things I'm somewhat known for is how many of you have ever seen YouTube and gotten an ad with a skip button on it? So that's a product called TrueView. The core of that product is a unique pricing model. So the advertiser who runs that ad doesn't, if you skip, the advertiser doesn't pay. But if you don't skip, then the advertiser pays. It's called a cost per view model. It's sort of similar to a CPC model or cost per click model that Google.com uses. But it was kind of, when we came up with it, it was somewhat unheard of in that category. And it was all about aligning the interest of the advertiser and the interest of the user. And it meant that we could spend our time on showing people better and better ads, and advertisers had to build better creative. It completely changed their behavior. It meant that all of a sudden, most of television ads are sold in bulk in April. You buy a bunch of inventory, it doesn't matter what you run on them. All of a sudden, we couldn't do that because the creative actually mattered. And so we couldn't pre-price for you. It's like the entire way our sales team worked, the way our ecosystem worked, had to be completely different. So it was much better value, but like a good example of I know not the example you're looking for your particular business, but it turned out to be the whole product. I mean, that business went from $0 to $1 billion in about 18 months. It was really, really fast growing business. And it was all off of a simple pricing insight. I mean, I think there's some principles that I think about with pricing. Actually, to give you just one other example, again, not directly relevant to what I think you should probably do. I sit on the board of Spotify. I think a lot of what we've done is about building a subscription business that works in a bundle. And figuring out how to price products in a bundle has become a fun pastime of mine. And that works off of a different philosophy. That works off of a philosophy of what we call super fans and casual fans. And the thing most people miss.
Super fancy casual fans.
No, super fans and casual fans.
Super fans, casual fans.
Yeah,
Okay.
and the core idea is that when you're building a bundle, you're trying to minimize super fan overlap and maximize casual fan overlap. Or another way to say that is if I have 4 products that each cost $10, what I want to do is bundle them together in a way that I can charge $10 to people who might have paid for all 10, and I need to introduce it to people who would have paid for one but appreciated the other 3. And so you're looking to minimize super fan overlap. You're trying to minimize the people that would have bought all of them, but maximize casual fan overlap. People would find value in all of them. If you do that well, you can produce massive wins in economics. If you don't do that well, then it doesn't work. And there's businesses, Netflix is a great example. Netflix for years said that they would never introduce advertising or sports. They just added sports. Ted Sarandos, the CEO of Netflix, is on the same board. He told me something like 50% of their net ads this year were by adding one NFL game and one boxing match. And so I do think pricing is a key part of the product. I think it can show up in lots of different ways. I think that generally speaking, aligning price with value is a reasonable thing to do. I think that's led to, in the AI space and the agentic space, in cases where you can assign value that's very close to the thing you're replacing. That tends to work well. I think there's a lot of people, the Brett and Clay at Sierra are really excited about moving towards resolution-based pricing for support tickets. I think there's a bunch of different support teams that have done that. And it's easy to think about as a buyer. You just say, I need this many less support people. I'll give you a cut of that. It's harder to do, like the problem with that in my mind, like I was watching the pitch from Salesforce and Agentforce, is it worked great until it became clear that they want Agentforce to be a lot more than support calls. But they have no idea. Now they've sort of boxed themselves into, we can replace support people. But what about all these other things we do that aren't really about support people? and now I don't know how to price it anymore. And now you're in a very confusing conversation with a rep who's trying to tell you that you should use this for replacing your BDRs, but I price by support calls. And so I think that model works well, but can narrow you.
So just pause right there. Do you ever want to react to anything or double click on anything, Sasha, or we can move on if not?
I mean, the concept of pricing to value, like the sentence pricing to value makes sense. The hard part is like, how do you determine the value?
Yeah, and my point in that story was more, if you're willing to be narrow enough on what value, you can probably price to it. And the more horizontal you be, the harder it is to price to it. I mean, I'll just mention two other quick things. There's obviously a lot of people in the AI space moving towards usage-based business models that can also be very helpful. I mean, there's some businesses, Snowflake being a great example of a business that has done a great job of that, OpenAI itself. I think adding unpredictability to your sales process is sometimes good and sometimes bad, because now you're counter-purpose to your customer. And then the last thing I'd say is for people who do SaaS pricing, which I think Grammarly has traditionally been SaaS price, so is Coda. I think the key concept I look for in SaaS pricing is I call it license resiliency. So in SaaS pricing, what you want to know is at some point your user is going to request a license. And you want to know what are the chances that, first off, that they get the license, like how good an argument do they have to make to get the license? And then the other one is at the end of the year when somebody's coming around and saying, hey, what can we cut? And somebody says, do you really need this license? What are the chances they argue effectively that I really need this license? And so I've just found that license resiliency is, each of these has a different challenge, but that for SaaS pricing, I found that to be the most helpful.
Did you do any specific learnings at either Grammarly and Coda on pricing around AI? Like just flat rate it and eat it and try and manage it on the back end, or move to a usage, move back and forth? I have not been monitoring your pricing.
I mean, both Coda and Grammarly opted for something much closer to flat rate pricing, but that's because the incentives for reducing usage are, you don't really want people bean counting it. It also happens to be the case that for a lot of products, you think about eating usage, but there's incredibly long tail of users, some that are going to use very little, some that are going to use a lot. And across a broad enough population, you for some of these products, you can arrive at a SaaS price that is fine and lead to something that doesn't disincent usage, which is the big problem with usage-based pricing. So we were able to make that work for all three products, Coda, Grammarly, and then Superhuman, the mail product we acquired a couple months ago. All three eat the cost of AI into a SaaS price.
I forgot that you guys bought Superhuman. Yeah, that's building quite a portfolio. Let's switch and talk about hiring.
Okay.
Shishir, you've said that candidates sometimes provide the most useful feedback to a company because they can be some of your harshest critics, even more than investors, board members, and so forth. Talk more about that specifically than hiring in general, but to the specific point, were you referring in that previous comment to you're interviewing a candidate to join your startup, you may or may not hire them, but listen carefully to their feedback on your company?
That's right. And I think maybe I'll give broader framework that's not just about hiring. I think about this as people in general. Is maybe it's the advice I give whenever people call me for advice on should I take this job or not. Family member, an ex-colleague, so on, they'll call and they say, should I take this job or not? And my general starting point is, first, I need to understand, are you going to be the big fish in a small pond or the small fish in a big pond? So that analogy by itself, probably everybody can understand. One thing to know about that is the dynamics of picking jobs like that is very different. So if you're going to be the small fish in a big pond, you have to worry about the size of the fish. So if you're going to join Google, if you're going to join Amazon, you're going to join Meta, the company kind of is what it is. Your job is to get there and become a bigger and bigger fish. What does that mean? That means you need to work on projects that matter. You need to work for a person who will promote you. You need to, these are all things you have to think about. And so for those people, they'll tell me, hey, should I join this? Should I join Google? And I'll ask them lots of questions about who will you work for? What will you work on? Will you get promoted? Blah, blah, blah. Not an incentive system that I love, but that's the incentive system that's created. If you're going to be the big fish in a small pond, all you need to worry about is the size of the pond. And by the way, compared to those big ponds, most ponds are small ponds. Okay, so you're going to be the big fish in a small pond. You need to worry about the size of the pond. Who judges the size of ponds? We don't really teach employees how to judge the size of ponds. We teach investors how to judge the size of ponds. And some do it better than others, but that's its own skill and technique. So whenever somebody comes and asks for job advice, I'll say, which situation is it? And if you're going to be the big fish in a small pond, I want you to pretend for a minute that this isn't a job discussion. I want you to pretend it's an investment discussion. Pretend you're not joining and you're just about to invest your next 4 years of capital into this one company. Or if that's uncomfortable for you, you're calling me and telling me I should invest my next 4 years of capital in this one company. How excitedly do you feel about this company? If it's not worth your money, it's probably not worth your time. It's one way to think about it. It also happens to correlate well with almost anything else you care about in the job. What am I going to learn? What am I going to accomplish? Like most of those things correlate well with will the pond grow. So not every employee thinks about that when they're going through a hiring process explicitly, but implicitly that's the thing they're thinking about, and you want them thinking about that. I mean, that you don't want the person that's coming in and joining because they like the color of the carpet. Like you want them to think like investors, especially in a startup where you're going to pay them in equity, you're going to expect them to work probably harder than they did in other places, you're going to expect them to stick through when things go up and down. You want them to think like investors and commit to the team. What I find, and so this leads to lots of, if you think about it that way, it leads to lots of consequences. So it means, ignoring hiring for a minute, in people evaluation, it means things like, I encourage most startups don't introduce levels. Like don't give people a way to measure the size of the fish.
When you unpack that a little bit, don't introduce levels, meaning what?
Don't have level 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Don't, like if you can.
How much title dynamism?
If you can, don't have titles either.
So everyone's a product manager.
Everyone's a product
senior
manager.
No VP.
You can have titles to describe a job, but try really hard not to give signals of size of fish, because the moment you put a little bit of fodder on size of fish, that's all people care about. And you really want them thinking about the size of the pond. And by the way, that sounds crazy. I almost got rid of levels at YouTube. Stripe didn't have levels until very recently. Coda, we added levels like 8 years in, and I added 5 of them, of which 2 of them were unused, or mostly unused.
And so all PMs, all engineers had the same.
I think it's like, if you want people to focus on the pond, don't allow them to focus on the fish. In every little thing you do, people are natural optimizers. If you tell them what to optimize for is how do I get promoted, that's what they'll optimize for. And by the way, the best way to get promoted is to be better than your peer. What does that lead to? Does that lead to wanting the best peers around you or the worst peers around you? In the hiring process, it means you want to give people every possible way to think about the pond. Like as an easy example, even if your company wants a particular choice, present people offers that are a cash equity trade-off. Make them think about what the equity is worth to them, and say, like you can make 100 grand, 120 grand, 140 grand, and like they come with different amounts of stock.
So put all those offers on the table.
Put them on the table, and they'll do the math quickly. Say, for $20,000, I get this much stock. Now all of a sudden, an investment decision feels real.
Who does that now? Anyone do this now? Like you can pick one of 2 options: more cash, less cash, etc. Okay.
But by the way, the other thing that does, once you do that, is it forces your recruiters to be able to guide them on an investment decision. So now they're going to come in, they're going to say, oh, that's interesting, so I can get 100K more, or I can get more stock. How much is the stock worth? And now your recruiter needs to be as good at pitching your company as an investment as you are pitching it to venture capitalists. So all of those things come back to a sort of simple philosophy of you want people when they're choosing your company to be thinking like investors. Now I guess your question is, what about the types of feedback they give? Now, the interesting thing is some of them give crappy feedback. They won't think this way, and they won't understand the market, and so on. Some of them will spot things in your company that are really the indicators of whether this product is going to work or not, whether this company is going to work or not, that many of your investors won't catch. Because you'll come and you'll give a pitch to Ben, and he's not in the middle of the company. He doesn't have 5 friends who work there. He doesn't. And they're going to come in and they're going to say, actually, so I have 3 customers that use your product. They're going to say, I have 5 friends who work there. This is what I've heard. I've heard your product, gets replaced by this other one. I don't understand why it's happening over here. And it forces you to tell your story differently. I also think it forces you to tell your story I think it's sort of like going public. Telling your story to a retail investor forces simplicity in your story. You can talk to Ben and you can compare with some other company that they already know. You have to like now get to the heart of like, why is this thing really going to work? So I think that kind of feedback is really helpful.
And so when are you asking the candidate for this feedback? Is this at the end of the process? Is this as you're going through it? Or in a sense, are you using their answers to the feedback they're giving you as part of you evaluating them?
Yeah, so the reason I set it up the way I did is like usually the time that conversation really happens, like up till interviews are a weird dynamic, right? Because you're selling until you're buying, and then the role flips, and so this candidate's in there and they're going to tell you everything about why your company's great because they want a job offer. The moment they have a job offer, it all switches. Right? Now all of a sudden they've got 3 other offers. And now you're on the sell side, and that's the moment when usually your recruiter puts down the 3 offers, says here's your different choices, and that's the moment they start to tell you how good an investment it is or not. And I do think
So that's one to listen carefully to collect the feedback that's useful to build the business.
Yeah, and to be like, I think I saw a bunch of people raise their hands on I present different equity and salary trade-offs. I would encourage, don't judge the person just because they pick the high salary version. It's okay. Some people have different life situations. It's okay. But just them having the conversation is really important. In that conversation, they're going to be talking to one of your recruiters, who's probably not the person you would put in front of your investors. But that's what they're doing right there. They're doing an investment call. And at that moment, if they say no, you want to know why. And it's likely to be feedback that you should take seriously as an investor.
And what's worked well for you for closing? You put the offers down. Now they suddenly have 3 other offers. They're giving you feedback. There's a back and forth. You're in sell mode. What's been effective to close the candidate you want to hire?
Well, I'll tell you, one of the things many companies don't do is take your investor pitch deck and train your recruiters on it. They should be able to deliver that pitch deck. And that, they'll have a variation of it, and they'll probably add to it, but you want that person to get that same pitch, the same pitch you're about to give an investor. And if you do that well, then people join. Or you do a bad job and they don't join. I
guess that would suggest that candidates are highly influenced by the compellingness of the business's prospects, right? Which I guess is what you want, but the investor pitch deck is not going to have as much about culture and other things like that, probably.
That's what I mean. That's what you add. So the recruiter will often add those things. Here's how our team works, and we're distributed, or we're in the office, and we do this awesome retreat, and they'll add those things.
Yeah.
But the thing that they probably won't add unless you teach them how to is, here's how to understand this market, here's how to understand how big this can be, this is how to understand pricing, this is how to understand share, this is the core insight, these are our different risks.
Yeah. Are there any other hiring topics people have that are top of mind? You can raise your hand. Hiring, making offers, closing candidates, et cetera. Anything top of mind for people on hiring?
All questions answered.
Let's go to Izada and introduce yourself. Yeah, the mic's coming over. There's a mic, Izada. There's a mic right next to you.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Izada, CEO and founder of Alma, tech-enabled immigration law firm. My question is, we're all the smaller startups out there looking for AI researchers, applied researchers, and scientists. And of course, we're competing with tech giants. So how do you recruit those people? I'm sure you're in the same boat. You're also trying to get best talent. And they want to solve very, very difficult problems. Although to me, the problems are the same. It's we're all solving difficult problems, but from outside in, they just want to work on big language models. So how do you attract talent and close them?
By the way, tech-enabled immigration law seems incredibly relevant right now. So I think maybe I'll answer on multiple levels. So the first one you said is you're trying to recruit these set of specialized folks. I personally think that my daughter's in college right now, going through all of her CS major, and I've told her, do everything you can to make sure you get AI in every part of your spec, your resume. And so I'm not so sure this dichotomy of AI people and not AI people is going to continue for very long. And I doubt most companies here really need fundamental researchers. We run a lot of AI stuff. We have some researchers. It's not the primary thing we need. We need people who are really good engineers. And I view it a little bit like when phones first came out. there was a big wave of looking for mobile engineers, and I don't think we really do that anymore. But to answer your other question on you're competing for talent with these big giants, I find this small fish, big pond analogy to be very helpful. So I think for a lot of them, they'll go in and they'll say, well, Meta's giving me this offer, and it's like, this is a lot of money, and I get to be in this big place. And I'll start describing to them what it's like to be at one of these big companies. And just to be super clear, I mean, I worked at Google for a long time, worked at Microsoft before that, and I had a great time. But I think for a lot of folks, they don't understand the dynamic of your number one job is to grow the size of the fish. And it's not a very inspiring way to think about what you're really going to do.
Yeah, it seems like the fish and pond thing. The key is also, I love the metaphor. It's like you're going to be a big fish in a small pond here, but the pond is growing and you can grow.
That's right. And so you come and you say like, yeah, you can be the cog in the wheel at this company. You know, here's where that's going to lead. I'll tell you one analogy. This is how many people here worked at Google at some point?
Worked at Google? Any Googlers? Just Henry.
Oh.
What were you doing at Google, Henry? Software engineer.
Okay. All right. Then I won't offend any ex-Googlers with this analogy.
Well, you might offend Henry, but you can take it.
Ex-Google, it's okay. Okay. I'll give you a little story I've told. Feel free to reshare in your own words. But this was so I left Google in 2014. And I mean, to be honest, giving my Google badge back felt like giving my passport back. Like, it was a great company, working on some really exciting things, but I was pretty committed to the thing I wanted to build, and so I gave my badge back. But a few months before that, while I was making the decision, I had a friend help me think about about leaving a place like Google, and they gave me this analogy that really stuck with me. They said, Silicon Valley is... most people think Silicon Valley is like 10,000 different companies, but it's really not. It's actually two companies. One's called Silicon Valley Inc. and one's called Google Inc. And they're each like different government systems. So Google Inc. is a benevolent dictatorship, and Silicon Valley Inc. is a capitalist democracy. And they have the pros and cons of each system. So what's the biggest pro of a benevolent dictatorship? Is you get clear decision-making lines. So in practice, that may not feel like clear decision-making lines. They gave this analogy of, it's kind of like, imagine you were trying to get bread. So sometimes when you're sitting inside Google Inc., it can feel like you're sitting in one bread line, then another bread line, then another bread line, then another bread line. And at the end
just with your cup out, looking for
exactly, with your cup out. It's Oliver Twist. And at the end of the 20 bread lines, you will get an answer. Like, there is a path to get an answer, and somebody tells you get bread or you don't get bread. The people inside Google Inc. look out at the people inside Silicon Valley Inc., and they look out and they say, look at these people running around with their heads cut off. They're all conflicting with each other. They've got, like, they were putting 3 coffee shops in the same corner. Like, why do they do that? They should have a meeting, 1 coffee shop. Like, that's the obvious thing to do. The people sitting inside of Silicon Valley Inc. look up at the people inside Google Inc. and they're sort of up in this big window, and they look like they're in the Politburo, and they all have, they don't exactly know how they got there, and they're kind of wondering, what do those people do, and how do they stay? And the people up there have all realized the secret. And this is the punchline of the analogy. Like I said, it's not very positive for Google, but the punchline of the analogy is all those people sitting up there have realized the one secret to staying in that Politburo is create one more bread line, and you get to stay. And it was like, this person tells me this, and there's a lot of implications in that. So, one implication that is when you join a bigger company, you're going to learn a set of skills that are very company specific. And there's nothing really that wrong about it. I mean, it's if I think about, like, I had a good run at Google, like, a lot of the things that made that work were things that, like, actually don't transfer anywhere else. Like, it's very specific to that place. It also means when you're joining Silicon Valley Inc., you're sort of joining this massive companies where the way they move around looks disorganized, the way that, like, if you looked at the United States, it looks disorganized, but it's actually quite efficient. And there's, like, if this one doesn't work, you sort of move to this other one. No central planner comes and tells you that, hey, your project is shutting down, we're moving your people over here. That's not really how it works. It's more like you just sort of move between these things.
So I think it's a good point. I hadn't thought about that, because probably all of us who've tried to recruit folks into organizations in the Valley often have to counterposition against big tech.
Yeah.
And the idea that, hey, you could go join Google or, at this point, maybe even OpenAI, Anthropic, whatever. You will learn a set of things specific to that company. Nothing wrong with that, but don't overestimate the transferability if you decide you don't like that job. Whereas come join our startup, it may or may not work out, but you'll leave with a set of skills and experiences that are highly transferable, including to starting your own company someday if that's what you want to do next.
That's right, and I think they're just a different set of skills. And what it leads to is, the end of what I normally tell people is, joining one of those companies is a many-year commitment. Because you're not going to really understand how the bread lines work in the first year, 2 years, 3 years. And so if your view is like, I'll go there for a year, I'll build something cool, and I'll go somewhere else, you're completely deceiving yourself. That's not how it works. Like, you go there, you learn, and then 4 or 5 years in, now you're able to have a real impact. And the chances that you're going to actually switch after that point is unlikely. And they have natural positive feedback loops. So that's a little bit of how I kind of position.
Any other hiring related questions? We're going to switch topics in a sec, but yeah, go for it, Anthony.
Yeah, here's.
And we'll just run the mic to you, Eric. If you can hustle over, please. It's right there. Yeah.
What are your thoughts on using recruitment firms versus running the process in-house?
I think recruitment firms. Well, first off, I'd say in a lot of cases, your investors have recruitment firms that can be really helpful. I think there's a couple things recruitment firms can do that are really helpful, and some that I think are not that helpful. I think recruitment firms that source out of a pool that you're unlikely to be able to source from yourself, I think that's incredibly helpful. For the more junior employees, that often is things like we made very heavy use of, our primary investors were Greylock and General Catalyst. Both of them did college recruiting in a way that we would never do. They put feet on the ground at every college. There's no way we're going to hire 2 people from colleges every year. There's no way we would sit at every college and do that. So that's a good example in my mind of they're sourcing a pool that you couldn't source. At the other extreme is executives. And there are executive recruiters who sort of rotate enough through a market that they have a pulse on people that you may not know would be looking and can get you access in a unique way. I think those can be pretty effective. I think some people hire recruiting firms to run a good recruiting process, and I think that's very ineffective. I think you have to be very good at running your own process of how do you run your loops, how do you make decisions, how do you do reference checks?
What does a world-class recruiting process look like if you own and operate it yourself?
Oh gosh, pricing is part of the product, recruiting is part of the product. I think this is every company has done it differently that I've seen.
How do you do it at Grammarly?
Yeah, I think there's a couple choices you make in that end up being very important. I think if I had to name a few, probably the most important first one is who's the decision maker on hiring, and each company I've worked at has done that a little bit differently. At Microsoft, there was a role called the as app, the as appropriate. So it was a person who was not in the direct chain of command of that person that would do the last interview and make the final hiring decision. They could override, or they could in either direction. At Google, it was all done by committee, and it was intentionally a committee of people that were not involved. But in Amazon, they use a tool called bar raisers that do something similar. But I think the philosophy of don't allow the person who's most desperate to add someone to their team be the decision maker on the person, I think is a pretty important philosophy. Another one that's pretty important to me is what I call, I should have stacked them differently. For me, the most important thing is I think companies that do great recruiting do great reference checking. I'm a pretty big believer in do every front door reference check you can, but backdoor reference checks are a good idea too. There's a way to do them without upsetting the world. But I think the idea that in small 30-minute slices you can understand better how this person is going to work than people that work with them for the last 5 years is sort of misunderstanding how people actually operate. So that one's really important to me. And maybe the last one on my list would be what I call home court, away court, neutral court interviewing. So a lot of what people do in interviews is either what I call home court or away court. So you interview someone. Home court is, I'm going to ask you a question that I'm thinking about. So hey, we're trying to redesign this thing. What would you do? And now that person's job is basically, they're not really supposed to give you a good answer. They're supposed to give you the answer that you would have given. That's their job. That's not really what you want. A way court is you say, hey, tell me about the last project you worked on and why it worked. And walk me through this hard choice and so on. And now you have no idea what was hard and what was not hard. What was that person and what was another person? Was that like really obvious or was that not obvious? So in my mind, it's really important to create interviews that create neutral ground experiences with problems that are not immediately what you were already doing or what they were already doing. And that's hard to do. I think designers do it with a design exercise, designing something similar for every role. Like for example, we're hiring an FP&A person right now, and we're making them build a model. And it's a model for this particular case, it's a real company because we started with some, but it's made up data. And we want to see them do it. We want to see what they do and how they present it. And I just think a lot of interviewing is people either regurgitating their past work or asking the role play in your work. And I think that's not.
I love the home court, away court, neutral court analogy. By the way, you have the gift of memorable namings for frameworks, which is 90% of actual like knowledge retention. But it reminds me, one thing we say in the Alliance is like when in the book The Alliance about how to get network intelligence from other people in the industry is a lot of people go in there either interrogate somebody about tell me all the secrets about your company, or they get interrogated. And both sides are kind of awkward about it. The right thing to do is talk about a third company.
That's right.
Like you work at
Neutral
Coda,
ground,
someone works
same
at Google, let's talk about eBay.
That's right.
Not try to do cross-interrogation on both people shut down. So there's this neutral court idea is actually powerful in a broader sense. I want to talk about rituals, but before we do that, can we just do a non sequitur, because we had a couple, is Alex here? Alex, let's talk about customer acquisition funnels. We have world-class product thinker. How do you optimize product funnels? Ask your question. Let's do rapid fire.
Yeah, excellent. I'm Alex Harmson, founder of Portfolio Pilot and AI Financial Advisor. I feel like I'm constantly switching between focusing on customer acquisition and a whole bunch of different channels and sort of the initial onboarding flow and then conversion and trials and actually then thinking about long-term retention. And there are like very different practices, and yes, technically it's all product development or GTM or marketing, but it feels like I have to surge resources to different areas, and it kind of feels like we cycle through focus rather than consistently building every part of the funnel, month after month. Maybe it's a short-term, small company problem, and we just don't have dedicated people for every part of the funnel yet. We'll get there, but maybe there's another secret here.
I mean, I think it's interesting. I feel like at Coda we did this okay. At YouTube, I don't think we did this well at all. Actually, I think it was a weakness in the team. Grammarly is world class at this. It's we spend over $250 million a year in marketing, which I think when you put money into a system like that, it sort of forces a really good behavior on how you make every piece of it work. I think that maybe a couple thoughts. I think making sure you see the whole, whether you're working on every part of the journey or not, making sure you see the whole journey is really important. It's often hard. You have to have a theory of your growth journey that may not be obvious. But I do think you have to see it at all times, whether you're working on all parts of it or not. But probably the more important thing is many products have counterintuitive growth journeys that I would spend the energy to draw the steps out in a way that, first of all, that a new recruit could understand, because it may not be really that obvious. There's a pretty famous example from Duolingo on the power of the streak, and how people reacted to that, and I think that they did a really good podcast on it that if you haven't listened to, I would highly recommend. But it was like
on how they developed the streak.
It's not the streak. The streak was the output of it was the thing they did because they discovered their loop had a particular magic moment that if they could achieve this moment, then everything else worked around it. And it just turned out to be one where they were actually optimizing for the opposite. And a lot of things will optimize for like, I want to take this funnel and I just want to broaden every step of it. But that's actually, maybe not what you need to do. And they discovered that if we could take this step way, way further down in our funnel and make that better, everything else started to work. And I don't think that's like, it's very product specific. Like I'll just give an example from Coda. Like for Coda, it took us a while to realize, and this back to pricing, for example, one of the unique things about Coda pricing is Coda doesn't charge for editors. And so if you think about most document products, there's a big share button. When you hit that share button, think Figma, Miro, Quip, Notion, so on. You hit that share button, every single person you're listing, that's cha-ching, that's dollars. Right? And that's the moment of monetization in that funnel. And what it does is it puts pressure on the person sharing to make a monetary decision on including this. Hey, I'd really want to work on this project with you. I'm not sure I want to pay $100 to work with you on it, but I really would want to work in this product together. We decided to make editors free. So we decided that the share button wouldn't be our monetization moment. The create button would be the monetization moment. So when you have to have a license to create a new doc, but you don't have to have a license in order to edit it. And we redid our entire growth funnel around this idea. Because all of a sudden, we want sharing to be free. And so we need to see that number go skyrocketing. And we're going to put our friction on create. And that's going to be the moment where you actually need a license. And so I think when you think about the idea of like, do you need to watch your whole funnel? Does that ever change? No, that doesn't change. And like you will swarm every part of it at different points. But I think the thing that people most miss is sort of back to pricing as part of the product, but like your funnel is probably very different than the next product's funnel. And understanding what that is with your theory on when this number moves, these other numbers are going to move, I think is really, really important. And then you put all your attention you can there.
Is Kathy here? Kathy, do you want to ask a quick question about security?
Sure. Hi, I'm Kathy Del Gesso. I run a security program for a cryptocurrency exchange. I'm not a founder, but I find myself here amongst a really interesting group. And I'd love to get your perspective on security strategy, right? And how you've thought about that in your impressive work history, whether it's Coda or another organization. When security became
So sorry, Kathy, can I just jump in? So give a hot take on security, because we have just a few minutes and I want to get to rituals. So how are you thinking about security right now, broadly, Grammarly, Coda, et cetera?
Oh gosh.
Especially like prompt injections, AI, so much surface area for security breach right now.
Hot take on security. I would say I have a very balanced view on security. Maybe it's a politically correct way to say it. I've seen both extremes. I've seen cases where people open up platforms. I mean, maybe I'll use YouTube as the example. I mean, there were things that we saw on YouTube that would make you cringe. I mean, people did you open up a platform like that, people do some really terrible things. But also, if you spend all your energy shutting those down, you kind of prevent the great ones too. And so I think there's a lot of products. This was true of Grammarly too. Like I came in, and one of the things the Grammarly team had decided was that one of the promises we were going to make to customers is that we remember nothing about you. And I was thinking about that. I was like, okay, I can understand how the IT person is going to love that statement, but as a user, is that actually a good idea? That Grammarly is completely unpersonalized? Is that really a good way to frame it? And certainly in a world where we're going to run all these agents that know a lot about you, like that's not a promise I want to make. I want to make a promise that's at the right border of utility and risk. I often, maybe one last sentence I'd say on it is, I just ask people to be really crisp with me for every security choice we make on the scenarios we're enabling and the scenarios we're preventing, and just like at the human version of don't give me a theoretical, don't give me this IT person is going to say, just tell me the actual thing the user is going to experience, what's the worst case and the best case, and then let's find the right spot in that.
Shishir, you spent lots of time interviewing tons of CEOs about the rituals inside their organizations that make them more effective. To close, share 3 or 4 rituals that you think work inside startups to make them more effective.
Oh boy. Okay, maybe I'll explain the concept first, and then I'll give you an example or two. Let's see. So I'm writing a book. It's called Rituals of Great Teams. It's a fun passion project of mine that takes up a lot of my evenings. It started with a conversation I had with a friend and mentor, a guy named Bing Gordon. So Bing, if people don't know him, he's now an investor at Kleiner Perkins, but he was the chief creative officer at Electronic Arts. He's very well known in the gaming community. He helped start Zynga, sat on many interesting boards, Amazon and many others. He and I sat on a board together of a small startup, and he kept harassing the CEO with this question. He said, "What are your golden rituals?" And at some point, the CEO says, "Bing, what are you talking about? What's a golden ritual?" And Bing had a really clear framework for golden rituals. And he said, "Whoa, golden rituals. Every great company has a small list of golden rituals, and they meet 3 tests. Number 1, they're named. Number 2, every employee knows them by their first Friday. And number 3, they're templated." They're named, every employee knows them by their first Friday, and they're templated. And he started listing off some of the iconic golden rituals he'd seen. Amazon does 6-pagers, Google does OKRs, Salesforce does V2 Mom. Each one has different reasons and so on. And he said, this is, if you're going to be a great company, you have to have a set of golden rituals. I got really excited about this idea. I started writing down my own rituals. I started thinking about other companies' rituals, started interviewing people, collecting them together. One of the people I interviewed gave me a really interesting way to think about it. Maybe it's an example of ritual too. So Dharmesh Shah runs, or is one of the co-founders of HubSpot. And he shared a ritual with me called flash tags, which I can say more about in a second. But he also shared this, he got really excited about the project. And he said, most companies don't realize, but you actually build two products as a company. You build one for your customers, and you build another one for your employees. The one you build for your employees, people call that culture, but if you actually ask people to describe culture, they'll describe rituals. They'll describe how it works. So I thought that was really interesting. So I'll give you one example I'll give you Coda's golden ritual. So if you'd ask anybody at Coda on their first Friday what Coda's golden ritual is, they would tell you about something we do called Dory Pulse. And it's a pretty simple idea. You come into a meeting at Coda, there'll be a document to read, almost always in Coda. And at the bottom of it will be this table called Dory. And it's a list of questions people want to talk about with a vote up and down button next to each one. And it's called Dory because it's the fish who asks all the questions. And the basic idea is that instead of everybody raising their hands or talking over each other, we're just going to go through the most important topics in order. And then below that is generally a table we call Pulse. And in that table, we ask everyone to, in one row, give their view on are they in support or not in support of whatever decision we're making. And usually it's yes or no, or it's a scale of 1 to 5, it depends on the decision, but it could be anything. We're trying to hire a candidate, we're trying to buy a company, we're trying to launch a feature, whatever it might be, here's where I stand, and here's why. And the key of that table is everybody else's responses are hidden until everybody's done responding. And so it's meant to remove bias, remove groupthink of going around the room and everybody says the same things. It'd be weird. Like what you asked an employee on the first Friday at Coda, they would almost certainly tell you about this. Like how's it going? They'd say, oh yeah, Coda, this is story and pulse ritual. But they don't actually care about the ritual, they care about the value, they care about the culture. And so what they'll usually say is Coda has a value, great ideas can come from anywhere, and they really mean it. I was in a meeting and I asked a question and it outvoted the CEO and it became a meaningful discussion. Or it was another discussion and I was asked for my opinion, but in a way where I was actually able to thoughtfully write it down, not cram it into a response in a meeting that was going around fast. And everybody clearly read it and it affected the decision. And the value of the company is great ideas can come from anywhere, and here's the ritual that most matches with it. So as you think about rituals, and if rituals at greatteams.com is
rituals at greatteams.com. Rituals of greatteams.com has a list of other rituals.
Yeah, so the book is, I'm publishing a chapter at a time. Welcome to come read it. Please do. Please give me feedback. Please add a ritual if you like. But awesome. As you think about rituals are a culture. This is the main message I'd give.
Thank you so much, and let's give a round of applause to Shishir from Grammarly. Thank you.
Thank you.